Lesson 27, Squaring Shortcut Number 2, and Memorizing 11 squared through 15 squared. Take a look at the introduction. The next lesson, Lesson 28, will be much easier if you can memorize the following: 11 squared, 12 squared, 13 squared, 14 squared, and 15 squared. Since the number 15 ends with a 5, you can easily figure out 15 squared by using the very elegant squaring shortcut number 1. The numbers 11, 12, 13, and 14 do not end with a 5, so you can't use squaring shortcut number 1. However, there is a different shortcut that you can use to help you memorize their squares, although it's not nearly as elegant. The next sentence is especially important. Use this shortcut only for squaring two-digit numbers that begin with 1, the numbers 11 through 19. And once again, shortcut number 2 is not nearly as elegant as shortcut number 1, so we're going to use this lesson to memorize 11 squared through 15 squared. Here's part 1. Students are going to follow along with their instructor to complete this lesson. Let's start with box A. Here we have 13 squared, and we're going to use a standard algorithm to calculate it. So 3 times 3 equals 9. 1 times 3 equals 3. Here's our placeholder. 3 times 1 equals 3. 1 times 1 equals 1. Let's find the sum. And our final answer is 169. Now let's learn shortcut number 2. Once again, we have 13 squared, and we can use a shortcut because we're squaring a two-digit number that begins with 1. So the first step is to multiply the ones place value, then add the ones place value. So let's start with multiplication. 3 times 3 equals 9. Next, let's add the ones place value. 3 plus 3 equals 6. Write it down. For the final step, we're going to multiply the tens place value. 1 times 1 equals 1. Final answer, 169, just like you see here. Now for box B. Here we have 14 squared, and we're going to use a standard algorithm. 4 times 4 is 16. 4 times 1 is 4, plus 1 more equals 5. Next line, here's our placeholder. 4 times 1 equals 4. 1 times 1 equals 1. Let's find the sum. Final answer, 196. Now let's use a shortcut. This problem will be more difficult because there is regrouping involved. So let's take it step by step. First, we're going to multiply the ones place value. Then we're going to add the ones place value. Let's start with multiplication. 4 times 4 is 16, so write it like this. 1, 6. And notice how small I wrote that 1. Next, let's add the ones place value. 4 plus 4 equals 8, plus 1 more gives us 9. Write it down here. Finally, let's multiply the tens place value. 1 times 1 equals 1. Final answer, 196, just like you see here. Notice that this shortcut became more difficult to use when there was regrouping involved. Let's move on to part 2. Use the squaring shortcut. Here's box C. Here we have 12 squared, and we can use this shortcut because we're squaring a two-digit number that begins with 1. First, multiply the ones place value, then add the ones place value. 2 times 2 equals 4. 2 plus 2 equals 4. Next, let's multiply the tens place value. 1 times 1 equals 1, and our final answer is 144. Here's box D, which also has no regrouping. Here's 11 squared. Multiply the ones place value, then add the ones place value. 1 times 1 equals 1. 1 plus 1 equals 2. Finally, multiply the tens place value. 1 times 1 equals 1. Final answer, 121. Be especially careful with box E, which involves regrouping. Here we have 19 squared. So let's multiply the ones place value, then add the ones place value. 9 times 9 equals 81. Write it like this. 81. Next, let's add the ones place value. 9 plus 9 equals 18, plus 8 more equals 26. Write it like this. 26. Finally, let's multiply the tens place value. 1 times 1 equals 1, plus 2 more equals 3. Final answer, 361. Here's part 3. Work on one column at a time to memorize the squares shown below. First, study the problems in each box in your mind and make sure you can recall the answers instantly. Here are a couple of tips. 15 squared has been previously learned using the elegant squaring shortcut number 1. And here's a refresher. So here we have 15 squared. And don't think 1 times 1, think 1 times 2. And that gives us 2. Next, 5 times 5 equals 25. And this shows that 15 squared equals 225. So this problem here should be pretty easy to memorize. Let's finish reading the first bullet point for a couple more tips. It says, also, notice how you can memorize 13 squared and 14 squared together since their products, 169 and 196, look similar to each other. So notice up here that 13 squared equals 169 and 14 squared equals 196. They're easy to memorize together because they use the same digits. So these two problems should be easy to memorize as well. 13 squared equals 169. 14 squared equals 196. And that leaves 11 squared, which is 121, and 12 squared, which is 144. It can also be helpful to make study cards just like this. Here, 11 squared equals 121. 12 squared equals 144, and so on. Let's read the next bullet point. After you study each of the problems, it says, next, write down your answers. Then, move on to the next column and repeat the 2 steps above. Cover up your previous answers when you move on to the next column. Let's try box G. 11 squared equals 121. 12 squared equals 144. 13 squared equals 169. 14 squared equals 196, and 15 squared equals 225. Again, notice how you should memorize 13 squared and 14 squared together since their products look similar to each other. One more example, box H. Notice how we have the same problems presented in a different order, so be sure to cover up the previous answers before starting on box H. Here we have 144, 121, 225, 169, and 196.